Yoga Yuktaha, engaged in devotional service. Vishuddha Atma, a purified soul. Vijita Atma, self-controlled. Jita Indriyaha, having conquered the senses. Sarva Bhuta Atma Bhuta Atma, compassionate to all living entities. Kurvan api, although engaged in work. Na, never. Lipyate, is entangled. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. Translation. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Translation with repetition. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches. Or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna. And he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjuna offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna was only superficially offensive because, as he has already been explained in the second chapter, all the assembled persons on the battlefield would continue to live individually as the soul cannot be slain. So spiritually, no one was killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only their dresses were changed by the order of Krishna, who was personally present. Therefore, Arjuna, while fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanathimirantasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, continuing from yesterday's discussion, so yesterday we discussed 5.6 verse, where the discussion was about the two kinds of sannyasis. How, whether if one is simply renouncing all the activities, although technically he can attain liberation, but there is a difference between the path taken by mere renunciation and by one who is working in devotion. So we saw yesterday as mere renunciation cannot bring all happiness, and the path is very difficult and it can take a lot of long time. Whereas one who is working in devotion, his path is filled with happiness and his destination is reached very quickly. So further continuing from that aspect of what we discussed yesterday, so today's verse is talking the qualities of a person who is involved in devotional service or work in devotion. What is his nature? So yesterday we also saw this word called Yoga Yukto Munir Brahma. So the souls who are purified by performing works in devotion. So similarly here it is further elaborated here. What happens, or what is the nature of a devotee? What is the nature of a person who is engaged in Yoga Yukta? So Prabhupada is translating here Yoga Yuktaha as engaged in devotional service. So one who is engaged in devotional service is known as Yoga Yuktaha, and one who is Vishuddhatma. Shuddha means pure, Vishuddha means very pure, and Atma means soul. So a person who is purified by engaging in devotional service. Now, Vijitatma. So here is a test of who is a pure soul. He can be self-controlled. He knows how to handle his senses, mind, his intelligence, his ego. So he is very self-controlled. And because he is self-controlled, he has conquered over these senses. Jita Indriyaha. Jita means to conquer. And what does he conquer? The Indriyaha, the senses. So usually when people talk about conquering, they talk about conquering things outside, another kingdom, maybe some business, and so on and so forth. But the person who is a purified soul, what he controls is, what he conquers is the senses. Further, the characteristic of a devotee is mentioned here as Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. So he's compassionate to all living entities. So this is another characteristics of a pure soul. And Kurvan api na lipyate. He is never entangled by, although he's working in different activities, he's never entangled. As we saw yesterday in the difference between the two classes of sannyasis, the Vaishnava sannyasis, they are constantly engaged, either in deity service, in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So the Vaishnava sannyasis, or the devotees who are purified by devotion, the works in devotion, they are constantly engaged in the activities. And here it is being mentioned that even though they are engaged in all those activities, they are actually not at all entangled. Unlike the common people, when they perform activities, they are entangled by the reactions of the works. But here, a devotee who is purified soul is never entangled by any of his activities. So let us try to look at the translation. Prabhupada is mentioning that one who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. So as we see in this world, we are all looking for peace and happiness. We are all looking so that all people can come together and live very happily. And here is a wonderful clue as who can become dear to everyone and for whom everyone is very dear. So here, a person who is engaged in devotional activities, a person who is purified by the works in devotion, and who is able to control his mind and senses, that person is dear to everyone. Otherwise, as we see in this age of Kali Yuga, there is so much fight over uh, non-significant things. And that is one of the major reasons is because of lack of self-control. Wherever there is lack of self-control, two people cannot be very happy, cannot live together very peacefully. And there is a certain sense of disappointment when the senses are not satisfied, and therefore they express the frustration in different ways. Or the mind is unsatisfied, and therefore there is an expression by quarrel, by anger, or different means. So here it is, one can see that who is actually dear to everyone and why everyone is dear to him. So Prabhupada explains further this in the purport, so we will look at that. And though always working, such a man is never entangled. So we all are working. Quite often we see that people who are working very, very hard, they find themselves in a certain fix. They think that, oh, if I get this new job, maybe I'll become very happy. But very soon people realize that the work that I'm doing is binding me in so many ways. I'm restricted in so many ways. I cannot find my true happiness. And they find, oh, there is something missing here in my job. I'm not very happy. I want to move to another job. But people do not recognize that it's not that the changing of the jobs can actually make one free from the entanglement. Rather, it is the path of devotion that one has to take. And if one's activities are performed in devotion, then even though he may be working in a company, can still remain unentangled. So let us try to look at some of the aspects that Srila Prabhupada is describing in the purport. So Prabhupada is first elaborating on the point of who is very dear to all living beings. So Prabhupada is mentioning that one who is in the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. So let us try to understand this a little further. So here it is being said that a person who is purified, who is working in devotion, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Now one may ask this question, why is it so? Why is that a person who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness, how can he be dear? Why not others are dear to others? So let us try to understand this a little further. So Prabhupada gives two examples here. So Prabhupada gives an example that because of his Krishna consciousness, the person who is trying, who is moving on the path of liberation, by Krishna consciousness, he is dear to everyone. So now the first point to note here is that because of his consciousness, because the individual is Krishna conscious, so what is he seeing? How is he seeing the world is very different from a person who is not Krishna conscious. So person who is devotee of the Lord, he sees that every living being is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So just like Prabhupada gives the analogy here of the leaves and the branches and the tree. So the leaves and the branches, they are actually part of the tree. And a man who is not very intelligent, he may see them to be very different. Similarly, all living entities being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the devotee or he knows. So the person who's in Krishna consciousness, he does not see the living entities to be separate from Krishna, and therefore he gives them due respect. And because of this, there is a feeling of goodness. He doesn't see them to be apart from Krishna, because if one who loves Krishna and who sees a reciprocation of Krishna, he also wants to act with his parts and parcel the same way. And therefore, a devotee of the Lord is never unwantedly angry, never greedy, or any sorts of those things, or engages in any fight, quarrel unnecessarily with anyone. So similarly, Prabhupada gives another example of feeding food to the stomach. In fact, this is prasadam here. So when the stomach is satisfied, when there is energy, food provided to the stomach, the entire body is nourished. And Prabhupada gives similarly the example, when the root of the tree is watered, all the branches and the leaves of the tree are also getting nourished. So a devotee of the Lord knows that by engaging devotional service, all living entities are satisfied. At the same time, by giving due respect to the living entities and seeing them in connection with the Supreme Lord, the living entity, the devotee acts in the rightful way so that the other devotee, the other person feels very happy. So this is the first analogy Srila Prabhupada gives, because when one sees oneself to be in Krishna consciousness, he sees others, he sees himself to be the servant of others. And therefore in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada has introduced a system of calling others by Prabhu. Prabhu means master, because he is considering himself to be servant, and therefore he is always in the mood of not trying to control, not trying to lord over, but to render service. And in fact, the Mahabhagavatas, the great Vaishnava acharyas, they all see that everyone else is engaged in the service of the Lord except oneself. And because of the extreme humility of the devotees, they see everyone else to be very good and everyone else engaged in devotional service. So when one is carrying this conception of life, there is no question of fight. There is no question of finding faults. So in this way, a person who is filled with Krishna consciousness, he sees everyone in the right perspective. Srila Prabhupada explains more about this aspect of how devotees develop these good qualities. But before that, I thought of showing one video. So this is a short video. I'm going to just play a small clip. So this is recently a devotee named Arjun Saka Prabhu left his body, and there was a Smriti Sabha remembering his activities. And here's a devotee who's talking about Krishna Saka Prabhu. So let us hear what is being said here.
He's a very senior devotee in our temple, but he never showed.
Is it audible?
Yes, Prabhu, it was.
Sorry?
Yes, Prabhu.
Sound is not coming from the video.
It was audible. But it is stopped, Prabhu.
Himself as a senior devotee. He was always gentle, simple, calm, quiet. One of the most important qualities of a devotee is calmness, that we can see.
Prabhu, we can hear.
In the festival meetings, I was a HOD of FR department. Sometimes some things can go wrong. People and all start shouting, arguing. Sometimes it happens. But Krishna Saka Prabhu would never argue, would never prove that he is right. He would tell his point and leave it. Never try to justify his right. That was quality. And he remained calm in all situations. And one more thing I have seen, although he was a HOD, senior devotee, he would not take any independent decision. Sometimes we take some decision on our own, but he would never take. He would always go to authority and take the guidance and implement. This is not so easy for everyone, but he had this quality. This is one of the good qualities of a good devotee. And I was touched by his humility. In 2016, I was taking Bhakti Vaibhav class for ashram devotees. So in general, after completing 3 chapters, I would conduct test. So Saka Prabhu also told, I'll also attend test. He was not well. So I was conducting oral test in my room, ashram room. So he told me, Prabhu, I also come and give oral test. So he's a senior devotee, he was senior devotee, 4 years senior to me. Still, he said, I'll come and give oral test. So devotees were standing outside the room, one by one was coming to my room and giving oral test. He was coming and standing among other juniors. He never tried to surpass them to come directly. He was waiting till others finished. So one by one, some 2-3 devotees were there. They took time. Sakaprabhu was patiently waiting. Even junior devotees, he allowed to finish their oral test. After that, his turn came, entered my room. All of a sudden, he offered obeisance. I was embarrassed. He was HOD, 4 years senior to me, but he offered obeisance. I was really embarrassed, immediately offered obeisances. Then he got up and sat and started giving oral testaments, repeating the verses. Then said, Prabhu, I am trying my level best to write exam with a test this evening, because he was not well, but still he prepared for oral test. So we can see here, although he was a senior, still he came to give oral test to junior, and he was waiting outside the room, allowed other juniors to attend, came and offered obeisance. So it's very difficult to see this kind of quality in any devotees in general. So I was touched by his humility. And 1.5 months ago, I went to guest house to meet him. I used to go and meet sometimes. It was on Sunday. So Prabhu was preaching, taking class online to some folk students of Puri temple. I was sitting, so I did not disturb. I allowed him, okay, you speak, continue. He was talking, almost 20-25 minutes was talking. He started the session, and I didn't want him to stop the session. So I was waiting. So he continued. After that, he told I was taking session for Puri folk students. Although he was not well, just 2.5 months ago, not very long. In spite of his health challenges, he had the spirit of preaching. Really, I was inspired by seeing his spirit of preaching in that condition. So although he was undergoing a lot of health issues, still he would remain calm. He would talk to me normally as if he was normal. In fact, I was expecting that he would come back to normal life after a few months. Just 10 days before his leaving the world, he was so confident. I thought Prabhu will come back to normal after 3 months or 4 months. That's what I was sharing with others devotees. But all of a sudden, he left us. In fact, it's a great loss for us. Nevertheless, we should understand that it's a plan of Lord. Krishna was the real father and a real well-wisher of every jivas. He knows that he was undergoing so much painful situation. Therefore, Krishna did not want him to continue the painful situation. Therefore, he has taken him. So I pray to Srila Prabhupada to bless him, to be engaged.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. We could not hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So I was mentioning that Mahaprabhu Gauranga Prabhu, a devotee in the ISKCON Bangalore temple, is narrating some qualities of Arjun Sakha Prabhu, who recently left the body. So you can see the qualities of great Vaishnavas, the quality of humility, the quality of equanimity, the quality of giving respect to others, and having faith in Lord. So this is a wonderful Smriti Sabha where the various devotees explained the various wonderful qualities of Arjun Saka Prabhu. So here it is even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he was instructing to Sanatana Goswami, he explains some qualities of the devotee. In fact, he explains who is a devotee and what are some of his qualities. So although there are so many qualities, good qualities about the devotee, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu summarizes them in short and to Sanatana Goswami. So Mahaprabhu says that a devotee of the Lord is always kind to everyone and he does not pick quarrels. So a devotee of the Lord, he knows how merciful the Supreme Lord is. And he sees the kindness of the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. And therefore, he also tries to be very kind to others. And he does not pick quarrels. He doesn't want to fight. And why is that so? Because his interest is in the essence of life, which is spiritual. Because he has absorbed his mind and activities in spiritual activities, because he understands the essence of life is spiritual, therefore his interest is in spiritual life and activities. And therefore, he's not hankering for mundane petty fights or some gain. Furthermore, it is said that he is equal to everyone and no one can find fault in him. So when a devotee progresses in Krishna consciousness, he will become free from the material contaminations, free from the material faults. And further, it is being said that his magnanimous mind is always fresh and clean and devoid of material obsessions. He is a benefactor to all living entities and peaceful and always surrendered to Krishna. Because he is surrendered to Krishna, he is very peaceful. He is not agitated with some success or some failure. He is equanimous. And he's a benefactor of others, not just that he's feeling equanimous and he's caring only for one's own self, but he's actually thinking of well-being of others. As we can see, Arjun Saka Prabhu, even though he was not so well, he was going on preaching, explaining the message of Lord Krishna. So he's very humble and is fixed in his purpose. A devotee of the Lord is very humble because he knows where he has to travel. And therefore, circumstantial ups and downs, some scoldings, some things, he takes as a mercy of the Lord. I should have been suffering a lot more than this. But by the mercy of the Lord, I'm just getting some scoldings or some small punishment. Let me take it as the blessing of the Lord and let me further my journey into the success or the perfection of spiritual life. And because he's so much focused in the spiritual life, he's not deviated or disturbed by any of the circumstantial ups and downs. He is victorious over the 6 material qualities such as lust and anger, and he does not eat more than he needs. He is always sane and respectful to others, but he does not require respect for himself. He is grave, merciful, friendly, poetic, expert, and silent. So this is a brief description that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives to Sanatana Goswami as how devotees are very merciful. Why? Because importantly, it is important to note that devotees are victorious over the 6 material qualities: lust, greed, anger, enviousness, jealous. And what else? Lust, greed, anger, enviousness, jealous. Pride, yes. So because they are over the base material qualities, they exhibit divine transcendental qualities. Whereas a person who is materialistically driven is filled with these base 6 qualities. And therefore, he cannot demonstrate good qualities, good character in life. And Prabhupada gives this example of how a devotee gets transformed and why his qualities are different from others. So let us look at this this explanation Srila Prabhupada gives in one of the lecture. Prabhupada says that Just like if you go to the physician and the physician is giving medicine, he's taking the medicine and cured. Again, he's affected with the disease, again going. So why is it happening? It is happening because he does not follow the rules and regulation given by the physician. Therefore, it is happening. The physician, as soon as you go to the physician, you have to accept something, do not, and something do. That is called regulative principle. Without regulative principle, you cannot correct yourself. So that regulative principle cannot stay if you're not a devotee. This is the gradual process. Simply I say, follow the rules and regulation. It will not stay unless you become a devotee. That is the test of devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Because it is so powerful, devotional service, that as soon as you become devotee, gradually, immediately, all the good qualities of your original position. So Prabhupada here is first emphasizing that what a devotee does. A devotee follows the rules and regulations. Just like a physician cures a deceased man with certain do's and certain don'ts and certain prescription of a medicine. Similarly, the spiritual master gives certain do's and don'ts in spiritual life. So sometimes we may follow the do's and may not worry about the don'ts, but don'ts are also important. Don'ts and do's, they have to go hand in hand. So when one is doing that process and one is becoming steady in that process of regulative principles, then gradually all the good qualities of the original position come about. Because just like a deceased man is not very healthy, but by giving the right food and avoiding the wrong foods, unhealthy foods, and taking the medication, he will come back to his energy, come back to his life. Similarly, a devotee, a person who is following the right principles of spiritual life, he will come back to his original consciousness. And Prabhupada further gives this example. Good qualities means we are part and parcel of God. So God is good, so we are also good. Otherwise, how can I be part and parcel of God? If God is gold, then I am gold. So why I become iron? I am not iron, but I'm covered with dirty things. I look like iron. This is the position. Actually, I'm not iron. I'm gold because I'm part and parcel of God. If God is good, then I'm good. So because I'm covered by material dirty things, I look like not gold. So this is the test. As soon as you become God conscious, your original, all good qualities will manifest automatically. So Prabhupada is saying that we are all connected with the God. We are part and parcel of the God. God is the reservoir of all good qualities. But because right now the consciousness of the individual is materially contaminated, the gold is looking like iron. But when one is following this process of devotional service, one is transforming one's consciousness. And as soon as one is transforming one's consciousness, one is becoming purified, and coming to one's original consciousness, which is full of good qualities. So this is a very important principle to note, at how devotees acquire good qualities. And there is this another verse in Srimad Bhagavatam which says, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvair gunais tatra samasate suraha harau abhaktasya kuto mahat guna manorathe nasti dhavato bahi. So it is said that Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana. So akinchana means without any motive. So bhaktir bhagavati. So unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if one is rendering devotional service, bhakti, without any motive, then what happens to that individual? Sarvair gunais tatra samasate suraha. So all the good qualities, gunaihi, suraha, the demigods. So all the demigods, whatever the good qualities they have, that qualities get manifested in that devotee who is rendering unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Whereas on the other hand, haro abhaktasya kuto mahat guna manorathe nasti dhavato bahi. On the other hand, haro abhaktasya, who are not performing devotional service to Lord Hari, what kind of good qualities they will ever have, because they're always driven by the mental platform. And mental platform means to accept something and reject something. So sometimes this is good, sometimes that is good. So there is no fixation. And therefore, they cannot be having any good qualities. So this is another verse which is further stating that if one is really engaged in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord, then all the good qualities will very soon manifest. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada also gives the list of 26 good qualities of a Vaishnava. So we'll just go through them as it will help us to understand how much each one of us have to work so as to acquire these good qualities. But the good thing is, if we render devotional service nicely, then all these qualities are automatically manifested. So 1, he is very kind to everyone. 2, he does not make anyone his enemy. 3, he is truthful. 4, he is equal to everyone. No one can find any fault in him. He is magnanimous. He is mild. He is always clean. He is without possessions. He works for everyone's benefit. He is very peaceful. He is always surrendered to Krishna. He has no material desires. He is very meek. He is steady. He controls his senses. He does not eat more than required. He is not influenced by the Lord's illusory energy. He offers respect to everyone. He does not desire any respect for himself. He is very grave. He is merciful. He is friendly. He is poetic. He is expert. He is silent. So these various qualities. So one important thing is that when one comes in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord, that's where one can see all these qualities being manifest. And it is by that example, one is transformed to get more attracted to the spiritual life. And similarly, when we make further advancement in our spiritual life, we will also manifest these qualities. And this is the test of how well we are doing devotional service. So the perfect example of this transformation is that of the hunter Mrugari. So the Mrugari, the hunter, who was half killing the animals. He would shoot the arrows, and the animals would be half dead, and they would be struggling in pain. And he adds no compassion on them, even though they were suffering so much. But when Narada Muni goes there and he advises him to take to devotional service. So when he says on the request of Narada Muni, when Mrugari, the hunter, he sits on the banks of the river and starts chanting in front of the Tulsi Maharani, he immediately sees a lot of transformation. And Narada Muni, when he brings along with him Parvata Muni, to show the transformation, the Mrugari, the hunter, when he comes walking towards Narada Muni and Parvata Muni, he doesn't even step on the ants. He becomes so sensitive. So sensitivity is another important principle. So as devotees make progress in Krishna consciousness, they become very sensitive, not to unnecessarily trouble even a small ant. Forget troubling other living human beings. So all living entities they see as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and they are very conscious. Just like if you pinch me, I feel pain. And similarly, if I pinch you, you will also feel pain. So why should I pinch you? Why should I trouble you? Why should I speak something harsh unwantedly? So this example of Mrugari being transformed from an animal hunter to a devotee who doesn't want to even harm a small ant is a wonderful example of one who takes devotional service and the transformation that takes place. Furthermore, Prabhupada writes in a letter to Badrinarayana Prabhu in 1971 that the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee is this. Just like the bee and the fly, the bee always is attracted by the honey, and the flies go to the open source. So the devotee is only attracted by the good qualities in other people and does not see their faults. He's friend to everyone, and in this way he finds his life sublime. So this is the nature of the devotee, that he's always trying to look the good things in others and encouraging them. Srila Prabhupada was always encouraging them, always encouraging the devotees to fan their interest, fan their services, and further those qualities in the service of the Lord. It is also important to recognize sometimes devotees may find fault, and that is because if they're given a certain responsibility to help us improve in the devotional life, then the superior authorities may find fault. But that finding fault is not meant to belittle someone or push down someone, but it's just to improve us in our process of devotional service to Guru and Krishna. So the chastisement of the superiors, the spiritual master, and the Lord is all favorable. And therefore, in fact, devotees who would be chastised by Srila Prabhupada, they would say that Srila Prabhupada's chastisement is also helping them in Krishna consciousness. And that always helped them remove their false ego or make them more humble, tolerant, and more focused on Krishna consciousness, and prevented them from going out of Maya. So we should also see when devotees, superiors, authorities are saying something, maybe there is a reason they want to help us in the progress in our devotional life. So here Prabhupada is saying that he's friend to everyone, and in this way he finds his life sublime. So a devotee's life is, because he's free from unwanted troubles and his activities are so good, his life is very sublime. And even in this purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that the devotees of the Lord have pure consciousness, because by his activities everyone is pleased. And because they don't engage in unwanted activities, their consciousness is not impure, it's not disturbed. And because there is pure consciousness, the mind is controlled, and when mind is controlled, the senses are controlled. So as we chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we become purer in our consciousness. We get freed from the false ego. We become free from so many unwanted things in our consciousness, unwanted habits that we have developed. So as we become more and more pure, our mind and senses are better controlled. So until unless mind and senses are not controlled, there will be always a conflict between two people. Just like Prabhupada says, two empty vessels make noise. What about two human beings being present next to each other? There will be definitely noise. But the way of controlling is by purifying one's consciousness. So Prabhupada says in this purport that when one is pure in consciousness, automatically the mind is controlled. And when the mind is controlled, the senses are automatically controlled. And a person who is controlling, as we see in this verse, Vijitatma and Jitendriyaha. So one who is having these qualities, he will be liked by everyone else, and he will also like others. Finally, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about Arjuna killing the enemies in the battlefield. So isn't that offensive? Isn't that not a good quality? So it is always important to note here, when we see things, we usually see from the mundane perspective of what is right and wrong. But it is important to see here from the spiritual lens. From the spiritual lens, no one is actually being slain, because every soul can never be slain, is eternal. And therefore, Arjuna, from the spiritual vision, spiritual perspective, is not killing anyone. And more importantly, it is on the order of Lord Krishna that he is following this act of killing. And therefore, his act is not like an ordinary act. So as we see, Prabhupada gives example, in the battlefield, when an army soldier kills the enemy, he is not implicated. In fact, he is glorified, because it is being done under the authority of the king or the government. Similarly, the first task of every living entity, Hamaiva Amsha Jiva Loka, Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha, every living entity being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and Ekala Ishvara Krishna, Krishna being the master of everyone, the first responsibility is to follow the instruction of Krishna. And if Krishna is suggesting to fight, Krishna is instructing to fight, then that is the prime duty of the living entity. That is the prime dharma of the living entity. And therefore, because one is enacting one's dharma in the constitutional position, one is not implicated. And in fact, that is the most rightful act for one to perform. In this case, Lord Krishna was personally instructing Arjuna, in our case, although sometimes we may see materially some things are good, some things are not good, but in order to develop the right spiritual perspective of what is good and what is not, we should read Prabhupada's books, we should be in the association of devotees, so that they would constantly help us see as what is the right thing and what is not the right thing. And Prabhupada says that in order to understand what is right and what is not, one should go to the spiritual master. One should, in a mood of humility, ask, in a mood to understand, ask rightful questions. And by the mercy of the spiritual master, the answers will be revealed as what is the right action to be performed, how it is to be performed, and when it is to be performed, and so on and so forth. So the act of fighting here is not to be considered like a mundane act of fighting here. It is not that Arjuna is trying to be offensive, but rather, in fact, it is liberating for all the souls who died in the battlefield of Krishna, in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, seeing Krishna. So this is something very important to note from this verse, that one who is controlled in senses, one who is surrendered to Krishna, he is not actually offensive to anyone. He is actually benefiting them in the highest way. So in that sense, Prabhupada says that this was not really a fighting in the sense of ordinary fighting. So just to recapitulate some of the points discussed today. So a devotee a person who works in devotion, who is purified soul, who has self-controlled, who has got who is self-controlled and controlled, conquer the senses, he is dear to everyone and everyone is dear to him. So why is that so? That is because by coming in touch with Krishna, who is full of pure good qualities. So when the living entity is rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, the transformation of the consciousness takes place. And therefore, the devotee also becomes pure like the Lord. And therefore, he demonstrates his original consciousness and the original good qualities that the living entity possesses. So that is the first point, that how we see that all the good qualities of the demigods are manifested in a person who is performing akinchana bhakti unto the Bhagavati, unto the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. And then Prabhupada also gives the example of the trees and the providing food to the stomach. So if one pours water to the root, then everything else is taken care. So rendering devotional service brings in all good qualities. So one need not have to worry or try to artificially satisfy anyone else. As we see, even the 6 Goswamis, it is said they were liked by both people. Dhira, adhira, janapriya karo. So both the sober and the non-sober people, they both priya karo. They were very dear. They were very liked by all the kinds of people because of their wonderful manifestation of spiritual qualities. So furthermore, we also saw that how when one's consciousness is well, one can control one's mind easily. And when one's mind is controlled, one can control one's senses very well. So we can see how these all things are so difficult by simply renouncing to purify one's consciousness, to handle one's own mind and senses. But in the process of devotion, this is much simpler. And therefore, Krishna is recommending that work in devotion is better than renunciation, although both of them lead towards liberation and self-realization. And furthermore, we also saw that it is also mentioned the purport that Srila Prabhupada says that how a devotee is always engaged in hearing about Krishna, in taking Krishna prasada, in going to places which are related to Lord Krishna. And in this way, it does not divert his attention from Krishna. And because his attention is not diverted from Krishna, he is free from illusion. His senses are controlled. And because his senses are controlled, he cannot be offensive. He cannot be quarreling with others. And we also saw the 26 wonderful qualities of a Vaishnava. And we saw how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave instructions to Sanatana Goswami on the wonderful qualities of the devotee. And finally, Arjuna's act of fighting is not really a fight of offense or trying to killing in the mundane sense, but because it was carried under the order of Lord Krishna, the activities performed by Arjuna are not at all entangling. So with that, I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, so yesterday we see sannyasi, Vaishnava sannyasi, and today we discussed about the characteristic of a devotee, right? Is there any
Yes.
relation
So-
between yesterday and today's class?
Sorry?
Is there any connection between yesterday and today's class?
So yesterday the emphasis was that the path of work in devotion is superior than renunciation. And the example is that of Vaishnava sannyasis and Mayavadi sannyasis. So work in devotion, why is it better? You can see in this verse as how he is dear to everyone, how he controls his senses very easily because he's engaged in the works of devotion, he is purified by the works of devotion, he is dear to everyone, he's happy, everyone likes him. And furthermore, as we see in this verse, that he is never entangled by any activities. So these are further describing the activities or the qualities of a person who is engaged in works in devotion. Whereas simply by renouncing, if one has to get all these qualities, he has to spend many, many years, have to struggle so much austerities, and still there's no guarantee whether he will acquire all these qualities. But naturally, when one is engaged in works in devotion, he acquires all these good qualities. So the path of work in devotion in comparison to renunciation is much more simpler, is much more happier. And one also, as we saw yesterday, that one attains the path, the goal, the supreme goal very soon. And there's further explanation in this verse about why that path is better, why that is good.
Okay, Prabhu.